years. So out of 26, we only have seven remaining. So the rest have all been failure. It's not been very good, but I can tell you the more you work on how you fail and pivoting from failure, the better the chances that you're going to come across a good idea. It's almost like a muscle. I mean, the more you work out a muscle, the better it becomes and the bigger it becomes. So the failure process has to be in such a way that you keep doing it, keep repeating, and that will give you better results in the future. If you try to avoid it, it's inevitable. In business, failure is inevitable. So it's something that it's very close to my heart, and I think I've embraced it. Maybe even gone to the other side where now we try a lot of things. Let them fail. I mean, the faster you fail, the better, so that you can learn from that and be able to move forward.
Welcome to Risk and Rise, the podcast where we explore the journey of overcoming the fear of failure, embracing risk, and achieving success in entrepreneurship, creativity, and personal growth. I'm your host, Talana Simpson, and I'm thrilled to embark on this journey with you. Together, we'll discover the strategies, insights, and shifts in our thinking and attitudes that are needed to turn setbacks into stepping stones and transform fear into fuel for success. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's episode of Risk and Rise. Dr. Chomba Chuma is an open-minded business leader, self-driven and results-guided individual whose leadership and entrepreneurial skills has spanned over 2 decades. We wanted to speak to him today on Risk and Rise, not only because of his vast experience with entrepreneurship, but also his passion for developing entrepreneurs and growing the whole industry around entrepreneurship so that we can impact and create more jobs. Enjoy Chomba's story of risking and rising. No way. What comes to mind for you, Chomba, when you hear Risk and Rise?
I was actually quite excited when I heard about this because I think it really captures what an entrepreneur journey is all about. Because there's an aspect of risk, but at the end of that risk, there is, like they say, there's light at the end of the tunnel. So you've got to understand what risk you're taking. Not really understand. I think it's more of you get to know it. And ultimately, that's how you succeed in business. So the concept of risk and rise just sounded very much like what I've been doing for the last many years, And I was very excited to hear that, someone is doing this because I think this is going to help a lot of people.
And I really wanted to speak to you. I've actually had you on my radar for a while. And I just want to tell you the story about why is because I was at a health talk. Yeah. And the person, I cannot remember who they were, but they spoke about velobiotics so highly. Oh. They described how they were excited about this new technology that helps us to absorb the probiotics in a better way.
Yeah.
So I straight away went, looked up velobiotics, made an order because I know there's so much about our gut health that affects our mental and emotional and physical well-being, and ordered it. And a couple months later, I got an envelope from you personally in the post.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this campaign you did.
Yeah.
So for one, you stood out because who gets post today, especially in South Africa where our postal system doesn't work? I don't know if you could do this now, but it was a good few years ago. And I wrote up, and it's a letter from you asking me to be a customer, to make an order. I think it was, but attached to the letter was a 10 Rand note, an actual currency note.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is someone I need to have on my radar. And it's wonderful because all the interactions with your velobiotics, there's a lot of it that comes from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I thought maybe you want to explain a bit about that because it really made you stand out in terms of this whole world, and also what Velobiotics is, because that's one of your entrepreneurial stories.
Yeah, yeah.
Both that.
That's quite interesting because sometimes we get to do a lot of things in business, and you can't remember exactly all the campaigns that we've run. But I mean, it's interesting to hear that stood out for you. I'm so. I mean, I want to run that again. um, but yes. Okay, maybe to start, Velobiotics is a journey that I started many years ago. I'm talking about maybe 15, 16 years ago. But it was not always Velobiotics. It started as Lighthouse Healthcare, and Lighthouse Healthcare is still there. It's still the majority shareholder in Velobiotics. But it's when I started in corporate. I came here. I'm originally from Kenya,
Yes.
and came to South Africa 21 years ago. That's 2003. Yeah, that's quite a while ago, through the pharmaceutical industry. So I was brought in here by one of the Swiss pharmaceutical companies as the medical advisor for the Sub-Saharan Africa. And I'm not a corporate person. I always say that maybe in a tongue-in-cheek way, but I really didn't fit in the corporate mold. So I was just looking for something to do which was different from what I was doing, but something that I had more control, and I was able to make decisions and be able to test all these ideas I have about customer acquisition, customer service, customer support. And that you can only do it in a small business. You can't do it in the corporate because the implementation of some of those ideas you have requires a whole red tape before you can get anything done.
Yeah.
So after working for 3 years, I actually also joined another company called Sanofi Aventis, which is a French company. And after Sanofi Aventis is when I started Lighthouse Healthcare. And we started by making our own line of vitamins. And after that, I also started importing some vitamins from the UK from a company called Vitabiotics. So we grew Vitabiotics in South Africa to one of the bigger providers, especially to Clicks and Discount. And in 2013 is when we parted ways with the Vitabiotics, and I continued with Lighthouse, and we started the probiotic side, and we had to give it a different feel and a different view. And by good luck, I came across, not really good luck, we really looked for something that is different. And one of the differentiating factors for us was the delivery system that we got from CSIR. So the CSIR in Pretoria is a research institution which has a lot of technologies. And I came across this technology and I was like, we can use this in probiotics and be able to deliver more in the gut. And there's a whole story around that because I had been looking at this from a few years earlier because I realized that my daughter had tried probiotics without any effect. And I knew, based on the data that there is on probiotics, there must have been something wrong. And from my research, I found out that it was more of the delivery. You don't get as much as you're supposed to get in your gut. And that's how Velobiotics came up. So when we came across this technology, we engaged with CSIR, we developed it, commercialized the technology, and eventually we got the products. So yeah, that's actually been my journey. I've just given you a whole rundown of where I've come from. But in essence, that's where I've come from. And the ideas you're talking about is I've always looked at engaging the customer at a level that they won't forget you. I mean, the biggest challenge we have right now is obscurity. If you can't stand out in front of your customer, regardless of how good your product is, it's not gonna make it. So we always try new ways of getting to the customer, new ways of implanting and building that brand, and just growing our brand in a different way, not just what everyone else is doing.
Well, it worked. I remembered you, and here we are.
I'm glad to hear that it worked on you, and I'm sure that has helped us in many other customers that we've acquired and possibly kept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in all that journey, because you've explained, you've taken a lot of products from conception to market to very successfully in the market, and that. Have you failed? What's been your experience with failures along the way?
You know what, Telana, this is for me one of my favorite topics, failure. And And it's because it's something that I had to unlearn in my later years. My basic training is in medical field. I'm a doctor by training, and I came from a country where very few doctors are trained. So you need to have done very well from your primary school all the way to high school and have got, you need to have good grades. I mean, our class, we only started, I think, 44 of us the whole year. So it was a very small class. And the reason why I'm saying this is because of that culture, there's a culture of always wanting to win. And by the time you get to the medical school, you've been winning. You've literally won a lot. And failure is not something that you even think about. And um, my life was all along, a lot of wins. You've done this. So there was not much failure until when I started my own business. And it was not very pleasant. It's very emotionally draining to someone who has not learned it. And I just realized one of the things we can do, especially when it comes to failure, is fail early and fail forward. But I'll tell you this, the trick is I started recording my failures. And I was actually just checking this before we got to this call. I've had 28 different businesses, distinct business ideas that I have started and failed. Not all of them. I think right now we have around 6 key distinct ideas. So out of 26, we only have 7 remaining. So the rest have all been failure. It's not been very good, but I can tell you the more you work on how you fail and pivoting from failure, the better the chances that you're going to come across a good idea. So in my later years, I've really embraced it. In fact, it's something that I was talking to my daughter the other day, who's now in college, and I was telling her, you've got to fail many times. And the earlier you can start doing that, the better. It's almost like a muscle. I mean, the more you work out a muscle, the better it becomes and the bigger it becomes. So the failure process has to be in such a way that you keep doing it, keep repeating, and that will give you better results in the future. If you try to avoid it, it's inevitable. In business, failure is inevitable. So it's something that it's very close to my heart, and I think I've embraced it. Maybe even gone to the other side where now we try a lot of things. Let them fail. I mean, the faster you fail, the better, so that you can learn from that and be able to move forward.
It's so wonderful to hear that. It's coming, as you said, coming from a background where there was no experience of failure to now embracing it in this way. And you said something interesting there, that there's a process of failure.
Yes.
So what do you mean by that?
There are 3 things that I like to highlight when it comes to failure. First is you've got to understand the whole learning process. I can't remember where this came from, but I don't know. I'm sure you heard of the concept of the learning process, the human learning process. I think it's a psychological learning process where you start with unknown incompetence. You don't know that you don't know.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a situation where you have a business idea, or you don't even know that a certain business idea exists. Yeah. And one of the best examples when it comes to this is when you're learning how to drive. I mean, we all learned how to drive in adulthood. So we more or less can associate. This can be a very good analogy. Then from unknown incompetence, then you come to known incompetence, where you know that now you don't know. And that happens a lot when you have a business idea, then you start understanding the market and you realize, oh my goodness, now I know how much I don't know. And that is so, that's where most people give up, because all of a sudden, let's say, for example, you came up with an idea on how to make an app, a digital app. And your idea is to put a digital app on, let's say, an education system, or you want to educate people about something. Then you didn't know that you didn't know, so that's where you started. But now you know the app and you know the market, and you realize, oh my goodness, there's so much competition. There's so much I need to do to keep up with the competition. It's so cheap, I don't know whether I'm going to make any money out of it. And now you start doubting the original idea that you had. And that happens so often. Then the second level is where you now know the competence. You know it, and there's a bit of competence. So you know the market, there's a bit of competence. And those two levels is where most people give up, where you know the incompetence and you know the competence. So that area is very, very gray for most people. But where you want to get is where what to talk about unconscious competence. So you are unconscious about your own competence because you've done it so many times and you can be able to repeat it without necessarily having to think about it. It's like you're driving a car. Right now, when you're driving a car, you could be drinking a cup of tea, you could be looking outside. No. But when we initially started, you had to look straight at where the road is. Otherwise, you're going to bump onto somebody or you're going to make a mistake. So that learning process is also the process I'm talking about failure. You have to understand that every level, consciously, the failure has to be there. But once you understand where you are at in the learning process, then you'll be able to handle it better.
Because if you're at the conscious incompetence, then you'll know now the areas that you can work on and grow and learn and where you need to develop.
Yeah.
Great. So the process of failure then is very linked to the process of learning.
Precisely.
Which is
I think it's one of those things where we don't give ourselves time to learn, and therefore we give up easily and we give up early. If you give up early, that will be considered failure. But if you give yourself time to learn, you'll also realize that it's a workable idea, so we move ahead with it. Or you say, it's not a workable idea, let's pivot and move to something else.
Which is progress, either way, yes.
Yeah.
All right, so that's one of the things you've learned from your journey is you talk about failing forward, failing early, and seeing it as a learning process, the whole failure. Is there anything else that has helped you? I mean, I don't know if there's a specific failure that you can think of that really shifted your thinking and your experience with it. If there's anything else.
Yeah, I guess the different failures now you can only look at them from the perspective of the specifics, because the business, especially when you're starting a business, and we're talking about small businesses here and business ideas being actualized into a full business, a workable business. You can look at it, you can split it in many different big categories, but you could say the idea failed. So you can consciously say, this is not a good idea. I mean, if you're going into movie rentals and you're thinking, now people are streaming, that's not a very good idea, So the idea itself, you could study and say, no, this idea is not right because we found out that this and this and this is not right. It could be a failure of, we'll talk about capitalization. There could be an issue of capitalization, but those are things that you can work on. But one of the other big areas, and maybe that is for me one of the biggest wake-up calls, is a failure in relationship, especially with the key stakeholders. And I'm singling out here one of the companies that I brought into South Africa from the UK. It's called Vitabiotics, and we grew it to close to $3-4 million USD in less than 3 years in turnover. And then there was a breakdown in the relationship with our stakeholders in the UK. And I didn't see it coming, and it just happened so suddenly. And it's a wake-up call when something like that happens so quickly, where you realize you've lost your business that you've worked on for like 5-6 years, and it's grown into so much revenue. And now there's no turning back. You just have to pivot from that. And you have to learn to be ready for those kind of unexpected failures, because it's a failure in a way. A failure of relationship, and it could also be a mistake. I mean, there could be a failure in you've made a mistake, financial mistake in the way you run your business. All of a sudden, you run out of cash flow, or it could be a change. This is something else that happens in South Africa quite often, where there's a change in the legislation. In our industry, it's very dynamic. You could wake up one day and you find that the medicine regulator has made a complete change in the way things should happen. And that happened a few years ago. and you have to scramble things quickly. And if you're not ready for it, you'll find that your product has been pulled out of the shelves. So there are those kind of failures, and you just have to work around each one of them as it comes. But you have to know that if something like that happens, it's just relearning that you have to go back again and realize now this has gone back to conscious incompetence. You know that you don't know. So you're back to stage 2, and you have to realize that you have to work it out all the way back to unconscious competence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with all that journey then, besides just it sounds like you really developed that learning mindset. What else has helped you to bounce back from all those setbacks and those failures?
You've actually mentioned one of the big ones that I had noted that I should also highlight, and that is learning and strengthening your mindset. And that comes through reading. I mean, one of the things that I've found out to be very helpful is reading. I mean, I found people don't read much. And for me, a book a week is minimum, because I'm not talking about fiction or books. I'm talking about nonfiction and in areas of business. And it's amazing because when you read around, especially if you read around people and model people who have done it before, you realize how much they've failed. It's unbelievable. Then your failures start looking very tiny. I mean, I don't know if you've read the new book by Walter Isaacson. He writes very good biographies on Elon Musk. And you just start listening to the kind of issues that he's dealing with every day. And it takes you to a completely different view of what failure is. And his mindset, if you just get into his mindset, to realize he's got a completely different mindset. There is no he accepts failure in his life, but it's not that he doesn't accept failure, but he has a mindset of just pivoting at every point to make sure that he avoids failure towards his goal. So he get to a point where a lot of people would give up, but he knows how to pivot very quickly, move on to something else, take a detour, but never lose sight of his common goal. And I think reading has been a very, very major aspect to overcoming a lot of those challenges. And it's not just about reading, it's also about reading and modeling those people that you're reading about. So I can't remember where I read this, but there's this, I think it was it's one of the gurus. I think it's not Robert Kiyosaki, but I'll remember when I tell you. I'll tell you, and when I remember, is this guy who says he always asks himself, what would so and so do? So if you've got a model person who is able to overcome a lot of failure, you'll always ask yourself, what would Bill Gates do in this kind of a situation?
Yes.
What would Elon Musk do? And that helps you to start thinking of many different aspects of how you can overcome the challenges that you're going through.
Yeah, that's so interesting to almost borrow someone else's view of the world to give you another perspective to deal with it. Yeah. So you've come from Kenya. You've spent a lot of time now in South Africa. You've worked with the UK. I believe also from your extensive CV, and that you've worked with the US. In all of that, from especially like your work in the South African context with businesses, and that, are there any specific issues that you think we face that's very specific to South Africa when it comes to starting up a business?
I have to be honest that South Africa is one of the best places to do business in my view.
Yeah.
I honestly think South Africa is a great country to do business in. And I'll tell you why. I'm not just saying this because I'm in South Africa, but like you said, we've got Villa Baltics in the UK, we've got Villa Baltics in the US, and we've got Villa Baltics in Kenya. I've done a lot when I was in the pharmaceutical industry, I traveled almost every English-speaking African country because that's where we were doing our business. But the reason why I say South Africa is a good place is because, one, it's easy to start a business. If you have an idea, there's no barriers to getting started. I don't know whether you've seen how efficient the CIPC site is to register a company. It's 100, I think I don't know whether it's still 175 rand. It takes you less than 3 minutes to get your company registered. And then if you have an FNB account, you open your account, you click on open new account, business account, and FNB has already pulled your details from CIPC, and it already knows that you have a company called ABCD Limited. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I've registered a Delaware company. I think we've got a couple of them. We've registered a company in the UK. It doesn't take that short. I think the only other country that has that quick registration is Singapore, or one of the other countries in Asia. So if you have an idea, you can get it to the market very quickly. Let me give you a good example. Try and register a company in Uganda or in Tanzania or in Zambia. It will take you days. It will take you lawyers. It will take you a whole list of things. Kenya used to take at least 2 weeks with a lot of bribing and all that, but now they've more or less brought things into an e-citizen platform. Things are much faster now. So just the idea of getting your business out quickly in good time and getting an account, it shouldn't be a process to register a company. So that's the first thing. The second thing in South Africa is the market is not as efficient as the developed countries. I'll give you an example. One of our products here in South Africa is called Femina on the Vilabiotics side. And Femina, we have a Femina, which is a suppository that is used in female intimate health, and it's boric acid. When we came to the market, there was only one boric acid in the market. And we didn't even have a boric acid that combines probiotics and boric acid. Now, interestingly, in Amazon, if you just look for boric acid, that is in the US, you find like 300 of them there.
Sure.
So you're competing with so many people, and you're competing with, the market is so efficient that it's quite tough to get your way around. I mean, up to now, and I'm not kidding you, I can bet you look around, there's only one probiotic with boric acid suppository in South Africa, and that is from Vilabiotics. And it's actually the only boric acid with a pharmaceutical approach, and therefore we are able to get to Dis-Chem and clicks. The others have not even gone that far. If you go to the US or you go to the UK, because the market is so efficient, the competition is so stiff. So that's an advantage for South Africa, because then the market is not as efficient as the developed countries, but the infrastructure is as good as a first world country, if not better. The third point is we have access to a lot of data, and that data will inform you on whether you've got the right product or not. And that might sound like a very vague thing, but before you get your idea started, it's always good to test it. And you always test it against data that is available. So, like, for example, if I'm launching a product here and I want to target, let's say, the medical market, because that's the area that I'm in, just finding out how many gynaes are in South Africa, obstetrics and gynecologists, where are they? What volume are they moving of a similar product? I can be able to pull out that data. Yes, I might be able to have to pay for it, but it's there. I can tell you a lot of African countries, they don't even know how many gynaes they have. So it's very difficult for you to be able to plan on whether your idea is viable. So I just feel South Africa stands a very good market that is able to springboard new ideas, and especially entrepreneurs in this country and even the African continent, because you can be able to springboard your idea from here, not just to Africa, but to other developed countries. So yeah, and the last point about South Africa is, we might look at the government as an adversary, but I think they've done a good job in some areas. SARS is highly efficient. Yes, it might have its own issues, but your VAT is reimbursed or refunded 7 days after you put it through. I mean, I can tell you countries where we were working as a multinational corporation and we had like 10 years backlog on VAT. So, South Africa has pretty solid systems to run a business. On the other hand, the developed countries have the same thing, but they're highly competitive. So if you have a good idea, I think it's always good to test it in South Africa before you take it overseas.
That's so interesting and so really positive, I suppose, about our country, because there's so much negative as well.
Yeah.
And one of those negatives is our huge unemployment rate. I mean, part of my passion in doing this is I find so many South Africans have this fear of failure. We fear rejection, we fear failing, we don't know what's we need more people taking the risk of actually starting a business and getting it going. So I wondered, just in terms of your experience there, I know you have a big passion to support entrepreneurs because of the, I think you wrote it in one of your, I think your bio, you're passionate about developing sustainable African businesses that address the chronic unemployment dilemma. So am I just, would you say that there is a bit of that there's a big, although we're efficient in how you can start and test out an idea in South Africa, there's a lack of people willing to do that. Is there?
Precisely. I think that's where the issue is. And I know there's something that we had mentioned earlier about entrepreneurship. I think the biggest, there's someone who mentioned South Africa currently, I think the unemployment rate is sitting around 32%, 33%, which is very, very high. And remember, from a formal definition, those are the people who are looking for jobs. If you include those who have given up looking for a job, it could be essentially higher. But I think you're right. There are two things here: fear of failure. But on the other hand, I think we haven't celebrated entrepreneurship as much as we should. It's because there's a time when, I can't remember who it was. I think it was a president or somebody who was talking about, it's when they established the Ministry of Small Business. There's this Ministry of, I think it's still there, if I'm not mistaken. But there was this idea of, if we created, I can't remember the exact number in terms of that 2%. I think it's something like maybe 15 million people who are unemployed. But the idea was, if we created 1 million businesses, and we had those 1 billion businesses each employing 5 people, that would be it. And it sounded simple, and it's very simplified. I mean, simple is not always easy, but I think I like that simplification, because then you have numbers and targets to work with, which is what we do in sales and business every day. So, but I honestly think that if we created businesses, small businesses, we could easily get the unemployment rate reduced to a very low level. Now, why don't we do it? It's like you said, there are two major things. Number one, I don't think we celebrate entrepreneurship as much as we do. We should. And entrepreneurship is not seen as a career. If you go and ask my matriculants or people in college, how many of you want to become entrepreneurs? Most of them will just choose professions. I want to become a lawyer, I want to become a software engineer, I want to become a doctor, I want to become this and that. But you never hear someone saying, I want to become an entrepreneur. And there's this ratio called the entrepreneurship to population ratio in a country. One of the highest, of course, is in the US, where I think the last time I checked was something like 12%. In Africa, South Africa is one of the best. I think South Africa is sitting at something like 0.5%. I would imagine the rest of Africa is 0.000 something percent. And it's, in essence, out of our population, how many people want to become entrepreneurs? And that ratio has to go up, because with high levels of entrepreneurship, not everyone can become an entrepreneur. But with high levels of entrepreneurship, you're also raising the number of small businesses that come up, and you're also raising the number of people who are getting employed. So if we actively work on entrepreneurship, we are also working on reducing unemployment. So that is why I'm so passionate about it, because I mean, think about what we're doing here. Let's say it helps 10, 15 people. And on average, let's say those 15 people in another 10 years end up employing maybe 10, 20 people. Those are 100, 200 people who have been employed.
Yeah.
And if we keep doing that and raising the levels of entrepreneurship in the society, have it included in the curriculum, it's amazing. My daughter just did matric last year. Now she's in varsity. And the much she knows about entrepreneurship, she's learned from me. It's not anything that she's learned from school. And we don't celebrate entrepreneurship as much as we should. I think it's something that we should do much more and increase the level of acceptability of entrepreneurship as a path that somebody can take, and not necessarily having to put them in one single block or in one single room and saying, this is what your profession is. Because as an entrepreneur, it's all about looking for opportunities and turning them into business. And that business employs people, and that reduces their employment. And I could go into healthcare, I could go into mining, I could go into almost every area, because the business principles remain the same. And you're able to cultivate that and grow it as you keep moving along. And the more you learn about entrepreneurship and failure, the better you become at it. Because right now, if you call me and tell me there's an opportunity in construction, I'll just apply the same mindset, because you've developed the mindset, and possibly there's a good level of success that I'll attain in that. It's the same reason why I find people saying that Elon Musk has got too many balls in the air, but he's got the basics of entrepreneurship. He'll go into Twitter, he's in SpaceX, he's in Tesla, and one of his my favorite companies that he has is called Neuralink, which is in healthcare. So he's able to apply the same principles everywhere. So if we grow entrepreneurs, I think that will do a big it will have a huge dent on unemployment rates in South Africa and in Africa in general.
Yeah, so very good points. So how can we celebrate entrepreneurship more? Because it's a very interesting point. Like how do we celebrate it? How do we?
It's interesting. we actually had this conversation with a friend of mine called Dr. Echun, and we were just discussing what can be done. And he came up with a very interesting point, which I'd like to share with you. He said, look at movies. Look at the movie industry. Look at how we celebrate the actors in those movies, and we celebrate the movie culture. So we can borrow that directly from the movie industry. We don't have to reinvent ourselves. But think about it. Every time there's a business that is launched, we need to go for a premiere. We need to put a red carpet, call everyone. And we just come in, and I mean, when you go for a premiere, yes, some few people are given tickets, and those tickets cost a lot. But that's what we should do with a new business. Then we promote it. We go and have selfies and everything there. We splash it all over the social media. This person has started a business, and this is what they're doing. But then after that, what happens is it's spread all over the country or all over the world. Distribution, basically looking at ways of how we can be able to distribute that business and their products or services all over the country or all over the world. But then on top of that, at the end of every month, I don't know if you've seen this, like the new movies. I recently went for a movie with my daughter, Dune 2, which is brilliant. I like that kind of sci-fi. And at the end of every month, they're talking about how much revenue it's collected. I mean, it's amazing, because then you're putting almost like target, and you're saying, oh, this is how much they're doing, and this is what is happening in this movie. Can we do that? Can we do the same thing with the business and be able to say, oh, by the way, this company now has sold 2 million rands worth of products in the first month, and celebrate the actors. So we should be celebrating the people who are actually doing it in the company. Have them out in the social media, go back to the how they're doing it, just get the whole vibe going. And then at the end of the year, we have Oscars, So there's a lot that we can do to celebrate entrepreneurship. And I just feel that we don't do enough for the industry or for the profession, for lack of a better word. But I think there's a lot more that we can borrow from other industries and see how we can celebrate that. Then be able to go back and forward in the education system, look at ways we can be able to promote this in especially high schools. I feel high schools are where everything should be started. Entrepreneurship is not there in high schools. Business studies are not incorporating entrepreneurship. And kids in high school should start doing things that are entrepreneurs so that they can be able to carry that through after high school. And when they go to college, they can even hone the skills even better. So there's a lot more that can be done on the concept of celebrating entrepreneurship. But like you said, it's also about celebrating failure. When someone fails, you're like, okay, this is fine, but then get up, put yourself together, start another business. We'll come for the launch the same way we did for the first. Yeah, so I think there's a lot that we can borrow from the movie industry, but I think we need to be very conscious about celebrating entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's always been one of my questions is well, there's the one side of the coin, which is actual helping people to overcome that fear of failure to start something, so that and as you say, celebrating in those people that are stepping into entrepreneurship as a career, making it more accessible and an option. The other side is then us as society supporting that. So as you're saying, we actually need to buy the ticket and go to the premiere.
Yeah.
And that was also in my question's always been, what shifts in society do we need to make in order to help people take the risk of starting something, putting themselves out there, of stepping up. So I think I don't know if there's anything to add to that, but I think you've explained quite a bit is we need to buy those tickets and go to the premiere and share it on social media and
absolutely
encourage the person.
Yeah, maybe just one last thing to add there is I'm glad that we have entrepreneurs being celebrated, but maybe more in the American version than in the South African version. I think we should try and start having entrepreneurs who stand out in the society. Because remember, the younger generation always looks up to people who have done certain things that they would like to model, that they would like to emulate. So when we think of South African entrepreneurship, we don't have those role models. And I think they should be standing out more. I'm not talking about entrepreneurs here. I'm talking about people who have created companies that are solid, that are good, and we can look up to them. I remember one of my most impactful meetings I ever had was I went to a lecture by Raymond Ackerman, the founder of Pick n Pay. And what a remarkable man he is, because he has actually put his whole business model and entrepreneurship in I think he's written 2 books. There's one called The 4 Legs of a Table. And it's incredible. Yeah,
it is.
It's incredible. And those are people who should be celebrated in the society. And a youngster in WITS or UJ or any other varsity should be looking up and saying, you know what, one day I want to become like Raymond Ackerman. I'm sure there are a couple of other good ones in South Africa, but if you think about it quickly, there's not many that come to mind. We tend to celebrate more of the American ones who have these massive multinationals. But I think if we had a good system in place, we could elevate those entrepreneurs to a level where we find them on social media, we find them in TikTok and Instagram. The people that you find in Instagram, and I have nothing against them for growing their brand and followers, we don't have a lot of followers for entrepreneurs to tell their story. And if they could tell their story, and I don't know, most entrepreneurs might not be wanting to show it off the way Instagram and the social media have become, but at least have model entrepreneurs that people can look up and say, I want to be there one day. And that is where I'm aiming to be in the next 10 or 15 years. And have a way of telling your story so that other people can be able to relate to that story.
Absolutely. And that's so true. I think as society then in South Africa, we need to start looking for South African role models.
Yeah.
And sharing their story. That's something we can do as just individuals to help the whole feeling of entrepreneurship to grow. So we spoke a lot about obviously failure and that. What about risk? Would you say you're quite risk fit? So I describe our fitness of taking risks as our ability to take risks and manage the fear related to them. How's your risk fitness, Chomba?
I think my risk fitness now is at a level where most people might not be able to take it. I think risk and failure are very much related, because risk is what the decision that you make before, and failure is how you handle it if it happens. If what you expected or the negative effects of your decisions are that come to fruition, and then you have to handle that failure. But yes, risk is also a muscle. I mean, it's the ability to calculate, and this is something that comes with time. Your ability to calculate what is going to happen and be able to see all the points and the connectivity of those points in the future, so that you can be able to know how to navigate and how you're going to pivot. I mean, we talk about pivoting a lot because I think pivoting is one of the most important concepts you can learn in business. But risk is about learning what pivoting is and having that future view of where to pivot and how you're going to pivot at every point. So like now you can make, and we do this even in business, even in big businesses. I think there's always risk to take when you're getting into a new market, when you're starting a new product, you don't know how it's going to perform. And you take risk because you have learned from failure and you're able to predict how you're going to pivot to keep your goal and your success almost certain. So the more you do it, it's the question of do, rinse, repeat. You keep doing it, you keep getting better at it. It's always different when you are going into a new field. But if it's a field, and I'm giving a good example, like now when we are in the health industry. I also have another company where we do medical management in as a practice. You're able to think of all the areas where things could go wrong, and you look for ways of mitigating that before it happens. That way, you know that you're not just taking risk blindly in a way that you could sink your business, but you're taking it in such a way that you know that if this happens, then this is how you're going to pivot. And if we get to this level and we find this is not happening, then you're going to change things and move up, along this direction. So then risk becomes a concept of understanding your market, understanding your business, and how you can change based on what will happen. Because guess what? Something is going to happen. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And they say that you'd better become, you should not worry, or you should not hope that bad things are not going to happen. You should wish that you become better in handling those things. So you build yourself to a level where you're so good at handling anything that you face in the future, and therefore it looks less risky to you than someone who doesn't understand the industry.
That is such a good way to explain the concept of risk fitness.
Yeah.
It's building your ability to handle whatever comes your way. Yeah. Is there anything else then just about starting a business? How do we just start a startup was one of the questions I wanted to pose to you, because I mean, it sounds like from your experience, you actively went like for Vela Biotics, you found the technology, you looked for it, but you obviously had an idea at first. And
yeah, you know what, I have to be honest, I think it's getting better and better and easier to find a winning idea. There's a book, I can't remember by who, it's called The Startup Manual. I think you can even find it on a PDF. And it talks about two things when it comes to starting a business, and that is a concept of customer discovery and customer validation. And you're giving an example of, let's say, Biotics, because we knew that, and this we, from a customer discovery perspective, we used data that was available in the market. And I remember we paid for that data. I paid for that data to find out what's happening in the probiotics industry. And that helped a lot because it was more of, I can see it's growing, so there's growth in that market, and therefore there's an opportunity. But in this book that I'm talking about, they talk about customer discovery and customer validation, two things that you have to do with every idea. In the current world, and especially with AI and social media, you'll get a lot of ideas through AI, Chat GPT, and the new one from Google called Gemini. It's amazing, especially if you go for Gemini Advanced. I've been using it the last couple of days, and it's amazing. So it's able to, you might have the idea, but then you want to run through it, the AI platforms that we have out there, and the AI will be able to give you a huge variation of those ideas, keeping to the same theme, but telling you to try this, try that. But that is the customer discovery. Then you start looking at what is the size of the market. Is it a growing market? Is it a market that is going to be this size in this number of years? Because you don't want to be in a declining market. So that is always the first part. Then the second part is customer validation. Now, customer validation is where you test. I love social media for this because there's no other place, especially when in the consumer industry. I mean, there's no other better place to test your ideas than in the social media. And some of the platforms like, and I see, this is very interesting. I find entrepreneurs who are like, I don't use social media. And I'm like, you don't know what you're missing. Social media is everything in business because it's what the big companies used to do in the olden days because they had a lot of money to test their ideas. Right now, you can do it for a fraction of the cost and get better data than a company would have spent millions of dollars many years ago and got possibly 10% of what you can get today. So you've got the idea and now you want to validate it. Like, I'll give you a good example. Before we did one of our fast moving products that this year has almost taken over all the sales, we had to validate whether this product is going to work well in the marketplace. And all you need to do is be able to run very, very inexpensive ads. You'd spend what? Maybe 100, 200 runs on Facebook, put a post and boost it or look for lead generation and just connect it to an email system and see how many people are actually going to say, oh, I'm interested in this. So like let me give you a good example. Let's say you're coming up with an app or you're coming up with a product that does the education system that you're talking about before. You could create an ebook that is possibly 5-10 pages saying, giving people ideas of what this app can do. And you put it as an ebook for people to download. But before they download, I want to take their name and email and run a lead generation campaign on Facebook for a week and see how many people are going to be running, to get this ebook. If you get 500 people in 1 week for 200 runs, then you know that there's a big interest in this. If you get just one or two and there's nothing else that is coming through, you are able to analyze the data and see whether people are clicking on it, but they're not interested. But if you're getting a lot of downloads, then you've validated that there's a customer base for it. Then you can start building on that idea. So it's the old concept of I first create a product and then I test it. That is very expensive. I've been there, I've done that. It's very costly. These days, we test the idea, we validate it, and then you come up with a product or you come up with a service. And that way, it becomes much cheaper for you to get yourself up and running, as opposed to if you just a lot of people keep ruminating about the idea and they never get to do anything about it. But with the current tools that we have, it's become simpler, easier, faster. You can come up with an idea today, and next week you have a business. It's that fast. Yeah.
God, it's a very interesting time to be alive, as we say.
Agree.
Chomba, as we just come to the end then of this episode, how can people get hold of you if they want to get in touch and ask you more questions or just hear more about what you're doing?
They can go to my website, which is chombachuma.com. And I've got all my details there to get in touch through social media, and also my contact details. They can send an email through the contact us page, and that comes directly to me. I'm able to answer immediately when I get time.
Okay, super. And I'll have that in the show notes. So I've got some rapid fire questions for you. So
Yeah,
that's
sure.
just the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
To just, give a quick answer. So what comes to mind when I say failure?
Do, rinse, repeat. Just do it. Keep rinsing, repeat. That's what I always think about failure, because that's the only way you can learn.
Yeah. What is your secret weapon for bouncing back from a setback?
Realizing that in another year or so, that will be all forgotten. So just understanding that you're going to learn through the process, and whatever outcome that you're going to get is going to be dependent on your actions. So I'm always thinking this is a massive setback, but in a year's time, it will be looking like something very tiny. So do what you need to do and get over it.
Oh, it's a good perspective. What's the most important lesson that you've learned as an entrepreneur?
That there's no market of one. A market is always a lot of people, and sometimes we get married to our ideas. Don't get married to your idea.
Okay. And what is the best advice you have ever received as an entrepreneur?
Is always I think I've got a lot of them, but I'm just trying to think of the top one. Is you can only invest in yourself. People think of investing in business and funding and capital and all that, but if you've invested in yourself, it's much better than if you invest in the business itself, because an investment in the person means that you'll be able to go through all the challenges that the business goes through. A lot of people give up because they've not invested in themselves.
And what do you mean by investing in yourself? Is that
It's
learning?
about reading. It's about developing your mindset, developing your skills, having that emotional intelligence just to go through a lot of things. Because, like I mentioned earlier, is you should not hope that you're not going to face a bad situation. You should wish that you have the skills to face that. And you can only face challenges if you've invested in yourself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like music to my ears. What inspires you to get out of bed in the morning?
The challenges and the difference that you make in every day through your business. The good thing about small business or any business is that you're solving problems out there in the world. And like they say, the bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity. So if you have a business and you're running and you're solving problems every day, you just wake up and get excited that today you're going to be sorting out 2, 3, 5, 10 issues to more people. So the bigger the business grows, the more challenges your business is able to solve. So every day you're excited that you're making a difference. And I think that's the good part about running your own business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do believe you're making a difference in all the work that you're doing. So just then, as the last parting thought, what advice would you give to someone who's struggling with the fear of failure and is really hesitant to take that leap into entrepreneurship?
I I think the biggest advice would be, I mentioned invest in yourself is a big one. And what that means is understand yourself and how you go through failure, because ultimately it comes to your own emotional response to that failure. And questioning and being skeptical about your own response, because a lot of us are so married to our own response, thinking that we are always right. But if someone else can be able to handle that challenge in a different and a better way, then I still have something to learn. So the acknowledgement of the challenges that you have as a person, not to handle that failure the right way, is a first step to saying, I can change this, I can make myself a better person. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges that people go through when it comes to failure. The acknowledgement of your own inefficiencies or your own shortfalls. And once you acknowledge, then you have a better position to say, I can do something about this. Because if you don't acknowledge, you won't do anything. So just acknowledge that I have a problem here in dealing with failure. Then from there, you'll be able to say, how do I get the right skills? How do I invest in myself to build a better person who'll be able to handle bigger challenges and better challenges? And failure is one of those challenges.
Thank you so much, Chomba.
Thank you very much, Tilana.
No way.
This has been Risk and Rise with me, Tilana Simpson. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with someone and give us a like or a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if there's something that we touched on today that you would like to know more details about, please do get in touch so that we know what topics we can start focusing more and more on to help you so that we can both risk and rise together. And just some One Matchstick news. So the search for the One Matchstick entrepreneur who will get the 6 months of office space that I created. If you go back to episode 2, you'll learn more about the One Matchstick story. The applications to find the entrepreneur has been extended now till the 3rd of May. So if you would like more details about that, if you think you're in Johannesburg and could do with some office space to help you get your business going, please go to onematchstick.co.za/search. All the details are there, and I look forward to receiving your application.
Thank you for joining me on Risk and Rise, where we face fears, conquer challenges, and rise above adversity to achieve our dreams. Find out more at riskandrise.co.za.